These videos are going live in July, this batch of recording. So, you know what? American college football season will be starting at the end of August. So it's appropriate. The Fox theme song, the Fox football theme song is appropriate, right? Right. It's a tune that lives in my head rent free. Anyway, as you can tell by the title, Drums of Autumn. Okay. By Diana Gabaldon, which is the fourth installment of the Outline series. Help me, because I can't help myself. The Outlander series. So this is the fourth one. I only have books 1 through 4 currently that I own, and I have read all of these twice. This is my first time reading the fourth one. So I read this. It took me about 6 weeks to read, which is really not bad. This mass paperback edition is 1,070 pages long. So that is Diana Gabaldon does not write short books. Okay. And I'm in uncharted territory. I have not seen the show past season 3, and season 3 is the only season that I've watched once. The other 2 seasons, so seasons 1 and season 2, I've watched multiple times. I'm actually a big fan of the first season. I just think that I told you I was going to ramble. I think that Stars did a really good job, and of course you have to give all the credit to the writers and the producers and the directors, whatever, executive director, the screenplay writers, the screenplays, script writers, costume design. The composition of the music is immaculate. Like, for season 1 is just so well done. They paid excellent homage to the first book, but I still think the show is its own entity. The acting is fantastic. I think they did a good job with casting. But I haven't, all of that to say, I have not watched anything past season 3. I've watched season 1 multiple times. I haven't actually watched the show in a very long time, even a rerun of it, because I just want the books to live in my head right now. What is this? Dragonfly and Amber, which would be season 2. It's just well done. But I think the first one is actually all of this to say, season 1 of Outlander is probably one of my favorite book to screen adaptations, period. Number 1 being Lord of the Rings. What's another one that I think just they did a really good job? Poldark, believe it or not, is, especially season 1, excellent book to screen adaptation. This turned into like Jane Eyre, the BBC 4-part miniseries. Excellently done. BBC version of Emma from like the early 2000s. Excellently done. My favorite Pride and Prejudice adaptation is actually a 2005, I think it's 2005, Screen with Keira Knightley and Matthew Macfadyen. I think the artistic liberties that they took is what pushed it over the 6-part miniseries, which I think for me is just okay. Yeah, it's true to the book, but I prefer a little bit more creative liberty when I'm watching something on screen. This was a tangent, but all of that to say, season 1, excellent. Haven't watched it in a long time, but I am in uncharted territory. That's what I'm trying to say. With Drums of Autumn, I was in uncharted territory. Let's dive in. If you're watching this book and you know that if you're watching this review, and you know that I'm covering the 4th part of a multi-book series. At this point, in my synopsis, there are some spoilers per se. I'm already talking about book 4, okay? But I'm still going to keep major spoilers out of this review. But some stuff I have to talk about. And that very, very, very vaguely. So anyway, let's jump in. Did I have a quote to start off with? I did. Some people try to persevere. Okay. Some people try to preserve the past, others to escape it. Typo. So in Drums of Autumn, Gabaldon has now placed her main characters, Jamie and Claire, in the American colonies. So Jamie and Claire, after book 3, let's go to book 2. Spoiler, but if you're watching me on the 4th book, we are watching a review on the 4th book, you're going to get what you get. So they are separated by the end of this book. They reunite in the 3rd book, but they reunite after 20 years. And They reunite in Scotland, but due to a series of events that take place in this book, they end up in the colonies. So they're on the cusp of the American Revolution. We're talking like 1769, right? The late 1760s into like 1770. So at that point, the America, which will become the United States of America, the colonies are on the cusp of revolution. However, back in the 20th century, because again, if you are watching this review on the fourth installment, this is a series in which time travel is possible, but not everybody can travel through time. Claire is one of those select few that can travel through time, but there are only certain designated spots in which a person can pass that veil. And so, again, Jamie and Claire are separated for 20 years. So back in the 20th century, Jamie and Claire's now adult daughter, Brianna, is struggling with whether or not, with the choice of should she stay in her own time in Boston, or should she venture back to the past, because she has never met Jamie, her biological father. So that's the framework of it. And that's kind of where I'm going to leave it spoiler wise, where you have how much time has passed with these characters. Jamie and Claire do have a child. That child is now an adult. This child has never met Jamie, even though she is like her father. She is the spitting image of her father. She is female. She looks like a female James Fraser. So one thing that when I review the Outlander books, I make it a note in my reviews to not really emphasize the romantic element of the story, because that's where it gets started. Like you could definitely put book one, I think, in the romance category, but to me it is historical fiction. Maybe a little. I wouldn't really call it fantasy. Maybe fantastical realism. Diana Gabaldon is exploring very interesting themes, and I think thus far with what I've read and what I've heard for people who've read the whole series, it's way more literary than people want to give it credit for, and that is because for the first 30 years of the publication, it was marketed as romance, and if you actually go in a bookstore now, it is under general fiction. And I think that it being categorized as a romance for so long did it a disservice, even though they're still widely popular. And yes, it's evident that it's written from the female perspective, especially when it comes to romance. But Diana Gabaldon is doing way more than that. And before she became a novelist, she was in a technical field, I want to say. I want to say she was involved in like the biological field in some way, like science, maybe computer science, something. I can't remember off the top of my head. I looked it up. But Diana Gabaldon is a very intelligent woman. And when you look at the themes that she is exploring, it's just so much more than Jamie and Claire. And Jamie being this very big, attractive man. You know what I mean? Like, it's just so much more than that. So these are the themes I like to focus on. And if you watch I'm all over the place, but if you watch my Drums of Autumn review, I actually talk about how that book has a lot in common with War and Peace. So one of the running concepts in this series is the themes of choice versus fate. And yes, many of these characters make choices. However, there is an element of the fantastical / the mythological. Again, we are in this universe, this world where time travel is possible, and the creatures of myths are spotted here and there, like the Loch Ness Monster has made an appearance. Other fantastical creatures have made appearances. There's magical realism. That's the phrase. Magical realism is evident here. So there is clearly this outside force, or these outside forces that do almost force some of these characters into certain choices. People like Claire. She didn't mean, pardon me, burping. She didn't mean to time travel in the first book. It was an accident. And then she travels back to Scotland in the 1740s and ends up, just right on the cusp of the Battle of Culloden. And so, thus uniting her with Jamie, a person who fate has decided, no, these two people have to be together. But But not everything in this series is choice, and not everything is fate. And so Diana Gabaldon continues to explore this theme. How much of what is taking place is free will? How much of these decisions are these decisions, these instances are happening because they're just destined to occur? But this time as the actors in a play of their own choosing. No, if anything was to happen to be between her and Roger Wakefield, who's Brianna's love interest, it would definitely be by choice. It looked as though she was going to get the chance to choose now. ... I mean, again, does she really have a choice? She thinks she does, but does she really? Because Roger's background also has, in how his story starts to play out. We become acquainted with Roger as a child in the first book, but how his story plays out, again, people think they're making choices, and maybe they are, but are those the choices that they were still destined to make? This is also a very ancient, this is a theme we see a lot in the Greek myths, the ancient Greek myths as well. How much is it free will or just the divine will of the Greek gods? I couldn't ask if this would be his choice. I had made it for him, and having made it, could not ask for either approval or forgiveness. So under that same vein, Gabaldon asked the question, can the past / can history be changed? Because again, we have key characters here, not all of them, who can travel through time. Claire can travel through time. For example, Jamie cannot. We have, throughout the series, we come across other time travelers. And Diana Gabaldon is very, very slowly peeling back what the rules of that time travel are. She's still piecing together this whole science of it, if you will, up until this point. In the first and second books, mainly in the second book, it's really in the second book, you have Jamie and Claire attempting to change the outcome of the Battle of Culloden in 1746 because Claire, coming from the future, knows how just the devastation of that particular Jacobite uprising. Some people call it consider it the last true uprising, Jacobite uprising, because what happened to the clans after that, they just never were able to. And then again, in the early 1800s, you have what's called the clearings, the Highland clearings. So it just decimated those clans in the Highlands in particular. So, however, all of their efforts did not change the result. In this case, history was written, was inevitable. Again, a theme that's explored, that Tolstoy explores quite a bit in War and Peace. But still, by this point of the series, in the fourth book, this is still an open-ended question. Some of these characters, like for example, Roger, believes that the past is the past, it's set in stone. Roger is a historian, so he's seeing things from a particular lens. While others, like Brianna, still think that the past there are certain things that can still be manipulated. And how she comes to that conclusion, I'm not going to give away. But there's also this moral question. If one knows that there are lives at risk, does the character have a moral obligation to attempt to change the outcome of events, even if those events may not be successful? Like again, Claire and Jamie trying to stop the Battle of Culloden, because there are lives at risk. There is some information that some of these characters come across in this book where, I have the supposed death date of some characters. If I know this, if I go back in time, can I prevent those deaths? What are the rules here? And is something that's set in stone set in stone? And if you know certain information, especially when it comes to life and death, do you have the moral obligation to at least attempt with everything that you have in your power? Can you attempt? Because sitting back and just letting something happen is morally unjust. This is the question that Diana Gabaldon is asking. No, the past might twist on itself like a writhing snake, but it could not be changed. He wasn't at all sure that Brianna shared his conviction, though. It was one thing to let them go, not knowing where they were or what had happened to them. It was another to know explicitly and to do nothing. Again, these are very interesting moral questions when it comes to, if you have information, what are you to do with it? Again, I didn't expect to make this connection today between the ancient Greek myths and Outlander, but well, I think it's fair because Diana Gabaldon does make references to Cassandra every now and then, the Battle of Troy, the Trojan War, where you have a character in the Trojan War where Cassandra, she's a prophetess. She is warning everybody, this is going to happen, this is going to happen. But people are like, nah, girl, whatever. She just wasn't heeded, right? So what happens when you have foreknowledge? Are you obligated to speak? And also the weight of foreknowledge is heavy. Like when you know information that other people don't know, it's a burden. And Diana Gabaldon really does touch on this a lot throughout the series thus far. Just one more point to discuss. Ooh, I am excited to discuss this because this is something I'm actually passionate about. And I see it all the time in the book world. And it's annoying. So one thing that Gabaldon also discusses is how Claire and Brianna, being from the 20th century, they project their modern worldview, even if they don't mean to. They're products of their time. They're projecting a 20th century worldview on the past, especially Claire. I like this theme and I wanted to talk about it because this is something that I see modern readers doing to the classics or to historical fiction all the time. Events, customs, language, words, historical figures, etc., have to be placed within their proper context. That doesn't mean that when the modern day reader comes, whether they're reading, like this was written in 1996, that doesn't mean that a modern day reader is going to open this book, whether that be this book or a classic, and see terminology being used. Racial slurs is a common one. I'm going to get to that in a minute. And that doesn't mean you're going to feel comfortable. But in my opinion, it is disingenuous for writers of historical fiction to use 21st century terms or 20th century terms that did not exist in, say, the 1700s. It's not authentic to the time. It doesn't mean you agree with the writer. But I do believe that discomfort, that dissonance that you may feel when you're reading a classic or you're reading a piece of historical fiction where the author, she chooses to use certain language because that's what was used during the time, that discomfort, you're going to feel it. Does that mean you're going to feel comfortable? No, you shouldn't feel comfortable with everything. That would be weird. But again, Claire is winding up. She winds up in the southern colonies, particularly in the state of North Carolina, slavery, and she becomes a witness firsthand to the slavery that is occurring during this time in the colonies that won't be abolished until the American Civil War. This has slavery in this country at this point still has 100 years to go, ish, just under 100 years to go, about 100 years to go. And Claire is uncomfortable. She has to, though, reconcile that she is in the past and she's in the past, though she's from the future. And this is a tension for her. Because she is, and this is the quote that's great, gave me a strange sense of dislocated double vision of existing in two places at once. The presence of the slaves disturbed me, but there was little I could do about it, save to call upon their services as little as I could, fetching and caring for myself whenever possible. So I do want to touch on this. Native Americans make an appearance in this novel. So Native American was the accepted term for a long time. It's still accepted. Now it's like First Nations or First Tribes is becoming that's a term that's now kind of becoming even more prevalent. It's kind of pushing Native American out of the way. Now people want to say First Nations or First Tribes. But for very commonly, it was, even when I was a young child, calling Native Americans Indians was widely accepted. Why? Because Indian was just short for indigenous. But in this book, yes, Indian is used, Diana Gabaldon, because these characters are from the time period that they're in, it's the context, they call them savages. Claire, Jamie, other characters, they're called savages, the red savages. And we don't say that anymore. That would be an insult to call somebody a savage, right? And is it comfortable? No, but these are people. This is a 1770s context. It would be disingenuous for Claire to use the term the First Nations. It doesn't bother me. So I did make a note to point it here because this is a tension that Claire is also dealing with, being in the colonies of the which will become the United States at this time. We got to stop projecting 21st century things on books and wonder why the book doesn't meet our standard. It was written at a different time. And mark my words, and I'm going to wrap this up because this is something that really bothers me. And then are people still trying to cancel books because they're not passing for the 21st century? It is because there are things that have become socially acceptable now. I guarantee you, our predecessor are there are going to be future generations that are going to look at things that were widely accepted in the 21st century and think, what were those barbaric people doing? It's going to happen. So this whole projection and why are they using these terms? It's insulting. I see people being insulted for the group of people who may not even be insulted. Like I'm not insulted that she's calling people savages in this book, and I also have Native American ancestry. I have family members, you look at them, it's like, yeah, ooh, that Native ancestry is up in there. Anyway, that was a tangent, but I did feel like it's necessary to admit because people have nitpicked Diana Gabaldon. I think it's an interesting discussion to have. Yes, have the conversation, but let's be a little bit more, I think, well-rounded about it. So anyway, and some of this is also in my conclusion on this book. I might cut some of that out. I went on longer than I had intended. For me, it's always a treat to pick up one of these novels, and Drums of Autumn actually became my second favorite in the series thus far after the first one. I think that Diana Gabaldon is just an intelligent writer. She takes what is at first glance a historical romance, but she continues to add this depth, and more it just becomes literary, how she's piecing these things together, the character development. Jamie Fraser is one of the most complex male characters I have ever come across in literature thus far, and I know that's a very big statement, but that is a very fascinating male character. I could do a whole video talking about the complexity of Jamie Fraser. He is obviously Diana Gabaldon made the main male character incredibly attractive. Ain't nobody mad at it. But she does not allow this character to just get by on his looks alone. He is very flawed, but he's got a good heart, but he's very, very flawed. There are times in the series you don't like him in some of the decisions that he makes, but she makes him just so human. To me, he's a better character than Claire. I could be in Jamie's head all day. There are times Claire gets on my nerves. But she just makes these characters very, very fascinating, way more complex than I think they even need to be. She's also incredibly accurate regarding historical events and even language dialects. There are so many people from so many different countries and centuries coming together. And she nails the intonations and how they speak. And of course, because it's a piece of fiction, she's going to take liberties here because it's fiction, right? And again, people who have critiqued her about how she chooses to portray Native Americans in particular, at this particular point in the series. But I watched an interview with her a few years ago, and she did a lot of research. She worked with members of the Mohawk and the Iroquois tribes to get certain things right with their own languages and their intonation of how they speak when they're speaking English. And yes, she says she's received backlash for it, but she consulted tribal members. And again, overall, like chiefs and stuff, they were like, yeah, you're good. And of course, she's like, but I can't please everybody. And there were some Native Americans who weren't necessarily pleased, but she was like, I can't please everybody. And I'm writing this a certain way on purpose. And so I just like that she stood her ground, and she's like, this is what I chose to do. And I did my research. I'm trying to be accurate, but I can't please everybody. I'm going to ruffle feathers. I applaud that. I mean, do you? I mean, that's not easy to do, especially in today's world. And she's still writing. I think finally the last book is going to be released soon in the series. This is just a novel I was never bored while I was reading it, despite it, again, being over 1,000 pages long in this edition. This was a page turner for me. And it was just one of those immersive reads that I really need from time to time. This is still intelligent and well written and just fun. This is not a... The Outlander world is a violent, grimy world at times. But, and again, even though we have these love interests going on, it's not vapid. And I will be picking up the 5th book next year, as I will be spending the remainder of my reading focusing on other books. I got to get through, I got to read the 3rd Game of Thrones. I'm really excited about that. I gave this book a 5 out of 5. One of my top reads of the year thus far. I'm going to wrap up. Are you into the Outlander series? Have you been curious about it? Did you always think that it was just a romance based on how it's been marketed, even with how the Starz show has marketed it? Because I think they really were trying to hone in on that female audience that it's had for so long. But recently, I've heard of male readers picking it up and like, oh, this was a lot more complex than I anticipated. Anyway, also, how do you feel about, do you agree or disagree with my position on books being placed in their proper context, and the time periods that authors are writing about should be also placed in their proper context in order to be authentic? Life's going to make you uncomfortable, so just be uncomfortable. Lots comments below. Also, feel free to like, subscribe, and you can follow me on Instagram where I get up to more book shenanigans. I post all of my book content there first. And yeah, that's it. Bye.